Patriots Pulse. I'm your host, John Sarianides, and as always, I'm joined by my partner, WEI's John Lyons. And tonight, we have a special guest joining us, our Paul Vozzello, who's done a great job with our draft coverage this offseason, joins us as well. Gentlemen, how are you on this almost Friday morning?
Yeah, not too bad, John. Just as I said to you a couple nights ago, kind of happy it's finally over, right? We got Will Campbell, we got through the first round, and now we can even look ahead a little bit to your and mine favorite day of the draft, arguably, and that's day two.
Yeah, definitely excited that this is over, wrapped up. It's been the consensus pick for a while, and it's been said for a couple months now, the bulk of the draft and the talent where you're going to find value is in day two. So excited for tomorrow for sure.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys. I mean, look, it's been a fait accompli now for a while that Will Campbell was going to be the pick. We thought going into tonight that this draft board was going to be pretty much chalk for the first four picks, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars decided to overspend for the second overall pick and throw us all a curveball. We'll get into that here in a few minutes, but let's start with the conversation, I should say, with Will Campbell, of course, Patriots selecting him fourth overall. Like I said, as you guys mentioned, this was kind of a fait accompli. We all knew this was going to happen. No surprise there. Mike Vrabel met with the media afterwards, and by the sounds of it, and again, obviously he's not going to come out and say we were torn on what we were going to do. We made this pick last minute, but by the sounds of it, it sounds like they were honing in on him pretty early on in the draft process, and it sounds like after they met with him and worked him out last week that kind of sealed the deal. John, I'm going to start with you. Just some initial thoughts on Will Campbell, the pick. Do you believe Mike Vrabel when he says this was our guy? We wanted him here. He fits what we want to do. And if you're a Patriots fan, should you be excited about this pick?
Yeah, well, I don't think any Patriots fan, unfortunately, ever gets excited about offensive line play, but they should because it's really important. And yeah, look, on Campbell, it feels like he's been kind of linked to them ever since Mike Vrabel got hired as head coach. And I know there was thoughts of Abdul Carter, and maybe if Carter was there, they would have taken him. Maybe if they had gotten a big trade down offer, they would have taken that. But in some form or another, Campbell's been linked to them basically ever since Mike Vrabel got hired. So I think it's safe to say that's a guy they're really, really high on. And I think they don't take him at fourth overall if they don't think he can play tackle. So I think they're not just high on him as a player, as a guy. I think they're high on him as a tackle as well. And I know the arm length thing, it's a real concern. And it's a concern even I have, 32 and 5/8 at the combine, then 33 at his pro day. But he's got that vertical length, which, John, you talk about so often, 6'6", 319. Also, excellent hand usage. And I know that's something that doesn't always show up on film, but excellent hand usage. It seems like at times he's made adjustments on that LSU offensive line, which is something typically a quarterback or a center will do, which shows I think he's a really smart guy. And look, guys, 38 starts, gave up 4 sacks total in the last 3 years, went against the SEC, also went against Jared Verse at Florida State. This is a great player. And I think the question is, and we're going to talk about it, and it's going to be talked about for the next 6 months, is it going to be a great player at tackle? Is it going to be a great player at guard? That's the key. I think there's no question to me. This dude's going to be a great player. It's just what is the exact position there? And it feels like, though, for the Patriots, they think it's at tackle.
Yeah, I agree. And regardless of if Vrabel is genuine about saying that this was the guy all along, he is a guy that will contribute to the foundational culture. And if he's not a tackle, he can bump into guard and be very successful there. But the bottom line is the Patriots kind of pigeonholed themselves into this. They didn't have much flexibility at tackle. They needed to make a move there. And in an underwhelming draft class, Campbell is the best tackle, or left tackle, I'll say. And he has the experience, John. You just alluded to that. He's been doing it for a while. He's been succeeding for a while. So is it the most exciting pick? Probably not. Did they need to make this pick? Yes.
Yeah, they had a gaping hole there. I mean, look, and to your point, Paul, they didn't address it in free agency. So clearly what that tells me, and I think you guys will agree with me on this, what that tells you is that clearly they felt comfortable enough with Will Campbell and going the draft route to address the position. So I think at the end of the day, you're right. It's not a sexy pick. It's not a pick that's going to stimulate the fan base. I mean, as soon as they made the pick, they had the annual draft party there. People were flowing out of there afterwards. Apparently, our Kevin Stone was at the draft party as well. He said that there may have been a technical issue with announcing the pick and that the selection was being discussed before it was actually announced on national television. I don't know what happened there. But the bottom line is, it doesn't matter whether it's a sexy pick or not. It's an area that they needed to address. And at the end of the day, as I've said all along, you can get hung up on the wingspan and the arm length all you want. He might not check off that box, but he checks off every other box. And I think when you listen to Mike Vrabel talk about this kid, he loves him. Of course, Pete Thamel broke the story during the ABC broadcast that when they worked him out down there last week, he put Mike Vrabel on his rear end in a drill. I think that endeared him to Vrabel. It endeared him to Elliott Wolf and Ryan Cowan and their front office. And so the bottom line is, it seems like there was some symmetry there between Vrabel and the personnel side of things. They all agreed that he fills a need, and he's a tone setter, and he's a cultural piece for us. He's going to come in and fit that culture we want to establish. And even after the fact, when he spoke to the media via WebEx, I mean, he's all business. That's the thing about this kid. He's mature beyond his years, and he's all business. He is not a kid who's going to come in and not compete right away to be the left tackle. And I asked Mike Vrabel that afterwards. I basically said, what's your timeline here? How long do you see him needing to eventually develop into your starting left tackle? And Vrabel talked about the importance of letting him grow into the position and letting him get the reps to prove that he's ready. But I think at the end of the day, if it's truly a competition, the expectation is that he wins that competition. No knock on Vidarian Lowe. He had his moments last year. But if it's truly a competition, you would have to think Will Campbell's going to be your starting left tackle.
Yeah, we're talking about an offensive line that had a pressure rate hovering around 50% almost the entire season. I mean, we're literally the worst offensive line in the league last year. And you move on from David Andrews as well. You bring in Bradbury, you bring in Moses, you have Onwenu at right guard. So it feels like they've tried to kind of, in a way, turn the page on this offensive line, because you're going to have a new right tackle, you're going to have a new center. Onwenu is going to be at least solidified at right guard. And then on the left side, I think it's going to be a Cole Strange, Layden Robinson battle for left guard. And then Will Campbell's going to be your left tackle. I mean, frankly, if he can't beat out Vidarian Lowe in training camp, then you blew the pick. I mean, he should be able to beat him out and be your starting left tackle in week one. And what I like too, and I think we're going to see this in minicamp, and I think we're going to see this in training camp, especially with guys like Keon White coming off the edge against him and Anthony Jennings. When he makes contact with people and gets his hands inside guys, they don't get away from him. And that's something that really impresses me.
That's the benefit of being a player at that position that has shorter arms, because the longer your arms, the easier it is for them to disengage and swat and swipe and get into all their little rips and everything else. But when you're short armed, once you get at that inside hand position, you can lock on and you can stay on.
And I think that's what's going to happen, right? I think you project this out. We're going to see in minicamp, early training camp, that's going to happen a few times. And all of a sudden, I think people are going to feel much better about him at left tackle than they do right now. Because, again, this is an offensive line that needed an overhaul, and it's needed an overhaul for 2.5, 3 years now. So Campbell's, I think, just the most recent and biggest piece of that.
There is going to be some growing pains, as with most rookies. But with the expectations that the fans probably have for him, it's how he overcomes that adversity and reacts to it. And he seems like the type of kid that could handle it very well. I think he's fit for New England and to play in this tough culture that is up here. But it's not going to be perfect. I think he does need a little bit of refining in his technique. I've seen a couple of things that I don't think are going to translate immediately, but he has that ability to keep growing. And again, yeah, it's going to be tough. It's not going to happen overnight, but eventually he will turn into at least a formidable left tackle.
Yeah, Mike Vrabel was asked about his character. The question was, in terms of his character, how does he fit the role of what you're looking for? And Vrabel said, well, there's a play style, there's a play demeanor. I'll tell you this. When we went down there to work him out, he showed up with one purpose, and that was for us to pick him. From the time that we walked in the building to the time we left and got on the plane, he had one objective, and that was to prove to us that he was the right player for us. I'll say that, and I can speak for everybody else that was there. So I think that just tells you from a character culture standpoint, Vrabel has a certain type of player he wants in the organization. This kid fits that mold. He's going to be the type of player that Mike Vrabel is going to want in his building. This is a kid who's going to be a tone setter. He's going to be a tone setter at practice. He's going to be a tone setter on game day. And he's going to be a tone setter in the locker room, in the meeting room, which I said this tonight when I was on with Joe Murray and Alex Barth on 98.5. They really lack that. They lack that edge. They don't have guys that have that demeanor. And I think that he's going to bring that edge to this offensive line. And I think that that's something they desperately have been lacking the last few years. You could say David Andrews was a leader. You could say a lot of things about that group. But the one thing you can't say is that they had that tone-setting mauler that set the tone with a pancake block, that got after people, that became the face of that group. I think this kid has the potential to do that.
Yeah, and it's funny, the qualities you just described, John, that's Joe Tooney, that's Logan Mankins, that's Damian Woody. Like every time the Patriots have had a good offensive line, they've had guys like that. You can even throw in 2018 Trent Brown if you want, like guys that had a little bit of an edge to them that helped make a good unit. And obviously Coach Skarnecki was a big part of that, but helped make a good unit into a great unit. So that's another thing that's, I think, valuable, because this is a team, guys, and we all know it. A lot of young guys are going to play this year and next year. And I think they're going to be better than they were last year. We saw a lot of young players play last year. But with a team that has so many young guys playing, some of those guys are going to have to step up and set the tone. And it feels like Keon White defensively could be a guy like that. It feels like maybe Will Campbell offensively could be a guy like that. And they need more than just those two guys. But I think that is an important piece of this pick as well.
I mean, traditionally, left tackle is always a leader, supposed to be a leader of the team. And if you guys weren't excited after what he said on the stage after getting drafted, I mean, that gave me chills, saying he would die for his team. You know, a lot of people can say that, but he meant it, you know, and also almost crying on stage just shows his emotion, how much he cares about football and how much he's going to contribute to the locker room, I think, as a great leader.
Yeah, and he talked about wanting to play for Vrabel, that Vrabel's a football guy. I mean, they obviously made a connection. And again, when you read between the lines there, this reinforces what we said to start the show, which is clearly this guy's kind of been, I don't want to say he's been the pick, but he has been the leader in the clubhouse, if you will, the last few weeks, where when they would have their draft meetings, his name, I'm sure, kept coming up. Obviously, again, he feels a need, but also barring Abdul Carter being on the board there, possibly Travis Hunter, or a trade offer, it was going to be him. He was going to be the player. And again, I think, you know, sometimes it's overstated, and you guys know this in football, but culture does matter. And if you want to be successful, we saw it for 24 years with Bill Belichick. Up until the last 5 years, the previous 19, 20 years, there was an established culture in New England, the Patriot way. And that was at the core of how the organization operated and why they won. And I think that Vrabel wants to establish his own culture, maybe not the same way as the Patriot way, but probably a similar culture. And in order to establish that culture, you need guys like this to step up and to be a part of the organization. When they get that opportunity, they need to not only step up and play up to their ability, but they also need to lead up to their ability. It's interesting to me because the arm length question did come up tonight. In essence, Vrabel kind of brushed it off. John, I know you mentioned at the start of the show that it is a concern to you. I've been on record as saying, and you know this, we've done a lot of shows together. I've been on record as saying I don't think it's as much of a concern. And I also see this left guard conversation as not being much of a concern. For me, I think left guard is a safety net. If, let's say, left tackle doesn't work for him and you have to kick him in 2 feet and he plays left guard, then so be it. That could be your safety net. Greg Bedard asked Vrabel about that tonight, and Vrabel basically said, well, we're not thinking about that. We're not thinking of him as a left guard. We see him as our starting left tackle. Just some thoughts on the left guard conversation, and is it valid?
Yeah, look, first, I do think it's valid. I mean, we're talking 32 and 5/8 at the combine, as I mentioned earlier, 33 at the pro day. I mean, Rashawn Slater's a really good left tackle, and he's right at 33. So if Campbell's really actually right at 33, I think then that's okay, right? Like that can work. And as we talked about, he has the vertical length at 6'6. He has excellent hands. He moves well. I would like to see him play a little bit lower. I think sometimes he gets too high, whether
Well,
it's
to
in his.
your point, I think if he ever had to play inside, that would be my concern. He's a natural bender for a left tackle, but I'm not sure he would bend as well inside.
And I think like the thing to remember here is if he's their starting left tackle for the next decade, this pick is a home run and you feel great about it. If he's their starting left guard, maybe it's not a home run, but it also doesn't make it a bad pick. Like that's still valuable to have. And for a player like Drake May, that yes is mobile, but we know the way McDaniels runs his offense and the way May has or his talent as a passer, they'd rather stay in the pocket and throw the ball, which means you got to eliminate pressure up the middle. So that in itself will be valuable. So I think they're going to put him at left tackle. They're going to give him every opportunity to succeed at left tackle. And to be honest, John, I think he can play left tackle. I just am it's not to me the slam dunk that Joe Alt was last year, that type of tackle prospect, but that doesn't mean I don't think he can do it. I think he can do it. I just kind of want to go to mini camp, go to training camp, kind of see it before I'm 100% all in on it. But again, I think either way, he's going to be really good and great player at one of those positions at a minimum.
I completely agree. I think with Campbell, he can be a good tackle. Is he going to produce as much as you'd like to see the number 4 overall pick produce? I'm not sure about that. But when I see him play, I do see some problems with overcompensating for his shorter arms, and whether it's lunging forward or even his speed and his pass set, sometimes he'll overset to beat someone on the outside against speed rushers and leaves the inside wide open. I think there's some problems there that could be fixed. But regardless, if he ends up at left guard and he turns out to be an all-pro level left guard, are you going to be upset with that? How can you be? If you know he's going to protect the middle, which also, I look back at what Mike Vrabel said at his introductory press conference when he first got hired, and the first thing that he mentioned specifically with helping Drake May was the offense and defensive line, and then even more specifically said pressure up the middle. So not from the edge or the outside, from the interior. So he values guards as much as tackles, I think. So even if they need to move him inside, I think Vrabel values him just the same. So if it needs to happen, it will. And to Vrabel, at least, it'll be worth the pick that they made tonight.
Yeah, Vrabel talked about that tonight after the pick. He said it's important that your tackles widen the pocket, but it's also important that you're firm inside in your protection. So obviously he believes that despite having 33-inch arms, Will Campbell can be a guy that can expand the pocket and work speed rushers outside. And then again, the one advantage he will have with the shorter arms is that if a guy tries to come back inside on him on a secondary move, if he can get inside hand placement, those guys typically, once they lock on, they win. The guys that have longer arms, that they give those types of pass rushers more of a surface to work with. So it'll be interesting to see. Nonetheless, like I said, I think, in my opinion, if it doesn't work out at left tackle, if you have to kick him inside, so be it. That's your safety net. That means you could still get something out of him. And, we talked about Joe Tooney, Logan Mankins. Those guys were tackles in college. Tooney was a tackle at NC State. Logan Mankins was a tackle at Fresno State. They come here, they move inside to guard. So is that what's going to happen here? It's too early to tell. And plus, here's the other thing. I wouldn't abort the mission that early. Even if he struggles a little bit at left tackle, unless he's struggling mightily, I would give it at least a year to 2 years more than likely before you made a move like that anyway. So I think you have to give the kid a fair shake. Nonetheless, I like the pick. I think, look, any general manager, executive, or coach that tells you that the draft isn't about filling needs, they're full of shit, in my opinion, okay? They're full of crap. It is about filling needs. That's the whole point of the draft. The only teams that typically don't fill needs are teams that are good, and they can take the best player on the board. But any GM, coach who tells you that we're going to take the best player available, that's a load of bull. If that were the case, they don't take Will Campbell at 4. At that point in the draft, you can make the argument Austin Genty's the best player available. Maybe they take him. But at the end of the day, or Jalen Walker. But at the end of the day, they do go Will Campbell. He does fill an immediate need, a major need, a need that, by the way, you and I talked about this, John. It's kind of been a need for them for 3 years now. So this is long overdue.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it feels like they went into the 2022 draft with some concerns at left tackle, went into the 23 draft needing a left tackle, went into the 24 draft needing a left tackle. Then they go into the 25 draft needing a left tackle. And it seems as though they finally got one. And that, again, that in itself is great value because left tackle is one of those positions. And we saw this when they were good. They had Matt Light for 10 years and you didn't have to worry about him.
Who, by the way, had 33.5-inch arms. So.
And then you had Nate Solder for what, 6-7 years or whatever, 7 years, and you didn't have to worry about him. And then that 1 year with Trent Brown, once he took over for an injured Isaiah Wynn, you didn't have to worry about him. Like, that's one of those positions you want to have a guy that you don't have to worry about. And I think outside of the arm length thing, when I see Will Campbell, I see a guy that you don't really have to worry about. And I think if he overcomes that arm length thing, and we'll know, I feel like we'll know pretty quickly. Like, we'll know by the end of training camp because they'll have some joint practices too. Like, we'll know by then whether he can hang or not. And if he proves that, then it'll be a guy for a decade that you don't really have to worry about. So again, this is an offensive line, as I said before, was the worst in the NFL last year. And over the past 2 months, it's gotten quite a bit better. It's still not an elite offensive line, and I wouldn't even necessarily call it great, but it's a lot better than it was. And I think Campbell is going to be a big part of that for the long term.
Yeah. You know who loved this pick? Drake May. He's going to have more time in the pocket to make stuff happen. And, you know, he might not even grow that much as a player because he was already really good, just couldn't stay in the pocket to make stuff happen because he was constantly dealing with pressure. So I bet you he feels more comfortable back there, more time to throw. We know he can process, make reads, and he'll have more time to do that now. You're going to see a lot more production now that he knows he can trust the left side of his line and not have to worry about a 300-pound lineman rushing at him full speed constantly. And on top of that, our run game hopefully takes a big step forward with the same players. Who knows? You know, word on the street is we'll add someone to our backfield in the draft, but I think you're going to see more improvement from Ramondre as well with our improved offensive line and running to that left side with Campbell. Campbell's a mauler and he likes to hit.
Yeah, people don't talk enough about him as a run blocker.
Yeah,
I think he's a terrific run blocker, especially a down blocker. I mean, he engulfs people. He can get his head across and move people as a down blocker.
It's pretty good in the screen game too, which is going to be in Josh McDaniels' offense. You got to have tackles that can move in space, and LSU didn't do it all the time, but when they did, it felt like I thought he moved pretty well in the screen.
He can get out there.
That's where the athleticism, you see that he scored so high, and you see that in the open field when he's able to get to the second level or on screen passes, working upfield. That's where you see his athleticism the most.
Now, let me ask you guys this. Are they done at tackle? I think they should take another one. Are they done?
It's a great question. And the name that we need to think about when you ask that is Caden Wallace. Because if they like Caden Wallace, they're done at tackle. If they don't like Caden Wallace, I think they take another one early on day 3. Personally, the way I think it's going to work out is they're going to take another tackle in like the 7th round, maybe, or it's going to be a couple of their undrafted free agents. Like, I will say, Will Campbell is not the only rookie tackle that they're going to bring to minicamp and training camp, in my opinion.
I agree.
I just think the Caden Wallace evaluation is going to tell us where it happens, right? If they don't like Wallace, I could see that 4th-round pick being a tackle. If they think Wallace was just coached poorly last year and had injuries and has potential, then I think it'll be 7th round undrafted free agent. But no, to answer your question, I don't think they're done. I'm just not exactly sure where it's going to be.
Yeah, I don't see them taking one tomorrow. And obviously you signed Morgan Moses. You have Caden Wallace. Vidarian Lowe, whether you like him or not, has proven he can at least stay out there and be a serviceable backup, I think. Obviously not a starter, but in a pinch, if you need a backup, I think he's proven he knows the system. So if they add one, it'll be late, probably a developmental prospect who once Morgan Moses is nearing the end of his contract, a player that can step up on the right side, or maybe they believe can be a swing tackle as a safety net for Campbell to move in to left guard.
I think they should take one relatively early on day 3. A guy that I like that I think would be a nice fit here and could be a developmental right tackle is Anthony Belton from NC State. I think they should consider a player like that. I think they're in a position, fellas, where I don't think that they can come out of this draft with just one tackle. I think they need to bring in another one. I know that it creates a glut. You already have a bunch of bodies on the inside at guard and center, but I just think given where they're at right now, and Morgan Moses has been relatively healthy in his career. He's been pretty dependable and reliable in terms of staying on the field, but you signed him to a 3-year, $24 million deal. He's not the long-term answer there. Onwenu's contract is up after next season. He's probably not a long-term answer there either if you decide to move him back out. So, in my opinion, a guy like Anthony Belton would make a ton of sense. 6'4", 335, 340 pounds, a guy that can move well laterally, has longer arms than Campbell, is more of a fit at right tackle. That could be a future right tackle for you. So why not draft ahead, as I like to say, and go out and get a guy like that that could potentially step in and develop into your future starting right tackle? Because, again, there's no guarantees there. Even with Morgan Moses, there's no guarantee he's going to be back after next year. It'll depend on their cap situation and where they want to spend money. So I think that they should come out of this draft with 2 tackles. I think Belton would make sense.
And John, you mentioned that they could have a glut there, and I kind of disagree because they've had the worst offensive line in the league. It's not really a glut. I mean, a chunk of those guys might not be here at the end of August.
Yeah,
really, I mean,
so
I mean, I look at it as you have Strange and Robinson battling for left guard, and you have Wallace there, and you have City So, and if you bring in Will Campbell, you bring in a couple other tackle, like, okay, like some of these guys maybe aren't good enough. Like maybe some of those guys bypass Vidarian Lowe or they bypass City So. Like that's the way I look at it. Like it'd be one thing if we were talking about the Detroit Lions or the Philadelphia Eagles that, had 4 or 5 established starters and, there's not a lot of room to maneuver there, or the Chargers, who I mentioned earlier with Joe Alt. But this situation to me was so poor the last couple of years that I look at that offensive line and I see 2 guys that have definite jobs, really 3 now with Campbell, and that's Morgan Moses, Mike Onwenu, and now Will Campbell. That's it. I think everything else, starting center, starting left guard, and the backup positions, I think should all be up for grabs come training camp.
Yeah, Vrabel made a statement by releasing a couple players already that clearly he doesn't care who you are. If he's trying to rebuild this team, he doesn't care. He will release you if he doesn't believe you're going to build towards the new culture and team standards he's trying to set. But as far as drafting another tackle, I agree. I think day 3 is a spot. Belton, a guy that I have been on since I watched him at the Senior Bowl. Super impressive. One of my favorite prospects from down there. And then another guy at the Senior Bowl who's getting drawn in as a guard by some people, and that's Emory Jones. I think he has the ability to play right tackle with some development.
I agree.
And and he's not going to go out there.
I think a lot of people want to make him a guard, but that is where the league is going though. Let's not forget the 6'6", 6'7", even 6'8". We've seen it the last couple of years with Daniel Falele in Baltimore, Mekhi Becton last year signing with the Eagles. The league is trending towards bigger, longer guards that can get on people and push the pile.
Yeah, and for the gap scheme, if you're just trying to get a helmet on helmet, move people forward, that makes sense. I'm not sure if we're going to be doing most of that. So as far as that goes, I think Emory Jones works in the scheme that we're trying to implement on offense here with
I think you'll see them man gap and zone block. I think you'll see them mix schemes. I mean, it's what the Patriots did forever under McDaniels in the old scheme. So I think that they'll carry some of that over with this scheme.
Yeah, and I think that's the way they should do it, by the way.
Yeah. You can't be one or the other.
The versatility, I mean, it only helps, right?
Yeah,
but Jones is a guy I could see on day 3 there, and then Logan.
I'm glad you brought him up, Paul, because he's kind of the forgotten guy at LSU. If you remember, though, going into 2 years ago, going into the 23 season, though, both he and Campbell were garnering national attention as preseason All-American candidates, preseason All-SEC. Campbell kind of stayed on that trajectory. Jones didn't. But even going into last year, there were a lot of people around the football world and the scouting community that thought that he could potentially sneak into the first round.
And Jones also, I need to say, is just turned 21 in March.
He's young. Yeah.
And he has 3 years of starting experience in the SEC with him also. So a guy that still has plenty of room to grow, plenty of starting experience, and a guy you're not concerned about with age, the complete opposite, actually, a guy you can develop, and then you can still get 10 to 12 years out of him if he develops properly as a starter.
Yeah. Moving along here, before we do that, I do want to remind you, you are watching Patriots Pulse. I'm your host, John Sarianides. As always, I'm joined by my partner, WEI's John Lyons, and tonight we're also joined by Paul Vauzella. Paul's done great work for us at New England Football Journal on the draft, going all the way back to when he covered the Senior Bowl for us. Do want to switch gears here. And by the way, guys, feel free to join the conversation. You know, we love hearing from you. I know it's late. We're into Friday morning here, but whatever. We love this shit. That's why we're up doing it. So feel free to join us and talk Will Campbell, talk draft. We'll talk whatever you want. Real quick, shifting gears here now. Let's talk about the draft itself. Just some overall thoughts on the draft. What got your attention? What surprised you? What didn't surprise you?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to use the word weird for the first round, because you had that trade at the very top of the first round where the Jags come up and get Travis Hunter. Then the Giants stick with Abdul Carter. Giants later on trade up. I kind of thought it was going to be for Shedeur Sanders, but they end up taking Jackson Dart. And the Browns trade down, take Mason Graham, which I did not expect them to take a defensive tackle in that spot. Though, again, like the player a lot. And then Colston Loveland going before Tyler Warren. I was a little, look, I think Loveland's a really good player. I was surprised by that. Also, Tyler Booker, kind of, to me, guard going to Dallas. Look, we know Dallas has built a reputation on building good offensive lines, but I just thought, like, we joke, or not joke, but we talked earlier about, guard at 4, Will Campbell, that'd be a reach. Like, that's a true guard at 12. I was a little surprised they went with that there. So not a bad first round, but just a little weird. Like the 2 Falcons draft picks, I think, are good players, but you drafted 2 guys at the same position and you used a lot of capital to get it. So kind of a little weird first round from my view.
Yeah, two other picks that really stood out to me was Emeka Egbuka to
I like
Tampa
that
Bay. But I like the player a lot. I just don't understand why Tampa Bay would take him with Godwin, Evans, and McMillan, who showed promise last year. Now you got 4. It's a good problem to have for them, but I think there's going to be a little bit of tension going on there with getting snaps and getting targets. And then the next pick was Barron to the Broncos, which phenomenal duo they have there now. But I really think they should have helped out Bo Nix. You had a Hampton on the board still. You could have taken Golden. And to me, it made more sense for them to go offense instead of Barron. Not to say I don't like the player, but that was a little weird to me.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, again, I think they would have preferred one of the 2 tight ends. I think had Colston Loveland fallen to them there, I think that's where they would have gone. But I think once he and Warren were off the board, I think that they feel that they have enough at running back that they could go and go get Jahad Barron, and now he can play in the slot for him as a nickel, one of the best slot corners in the country the last 2 years. I can't believe Jacksonville gave up as much as they did for Travis Hunter. And ESPN, spare me with this bullshit that he's Shohei Ohtani. Can we stop? No, he's not. Okay? He's a good football player, but he's not worth that haul. And I'll take it a step further. He's not playing both ways in the NFL. He's going to play predominantly one side of the ball or the other. He might play some snaps on the other side of the ball, but it is not sustainable for this kid to play every single snap other than special team snaps in the course of an NFL game over the course of 17 weeks. That's not going to happen, so stop pretending like he's going to do it. I cannot believe for the life of me that Jacksonville gave up that haul to move up 3 spots. 3. If I'm Andrew Berry, I'm doing backflips. My fat ass would be doing backflips if I were Andrew Berry at that point. The fact that they were willing to give up that kind of a haul to move up 3 spots to take a non-quarterback, look, that's the kind of capital you give up when you're moving up to get a quarterback, not a wide receiver who, if you talk to scouts around the league, and I talked to a lot of people, they said to me that a lot of people around the league saw him as a defensive back first. They don't see him as a wide receiver first. So never mind how the media is window dressing him because he's a two-way player. The reality is the majority of the league viewed him as a defensive back first. So if you go based on that, you give up 4 picks, including a future first, for a guy that, by all accounts, they're going to play a wide receiver. But I mean, come on now, let's not kid ourselves. Is he going to make that much of a difference for that team? I just don't get that. That was bizarre to me. I agree with you, John. You mentioned Atlanta. They take Jalen Walker, which I think is a terrific value pick at 15. Look, I'm a James Pierce fan, and I know he comes with some baggage, and there was some question marks about his effort. You give up a future first to move back into the first round to get a guy who you probably could have gone at the top of the second round tomorrow night and given up less.
Yeah.
That
it feels like the Falcons' motto is redundancy, right? They sign Kirk Cousins, then draft Michael Penix, right? They draft Jalen Walker, then trade up for James Pierce. It's like they just want to be redundant with some of the stuff they do. I will say, I think speaking of receiver, though, John, my favorite pick, Matthew Golden going to Green Bay. I like that a lot.
First time they're taking a receiver since 2002.
Yeah, and the speed is there, but also he's such a smooth route runner, and the way he moves around in zone defenses as well. I think that's really important. And I think Matt LaFleur is going to put this guy in motion. I think they're going to use him quite a bit like Miami uses Tyreek Hill, where they get him in those fast motions, get him going upfield at the snap. And I think he's going to be one of those guys that I think has an immediate impact with Green Bay, and I think helps them potentially go deep in the playoffs. That's going to be my favorite pick of the first round.
Yeah, and I like it especially because you don't know when Christian Watson's going to be on the field or when he's going to be in a cast. So
right,
he's golden.
If you can keep Watson healthy with Jalen Jalen Reed and Matthew Golden now and Romeo Doubs, I mean, and Dontavian Wicks, that's a really good receiving core.
Yeah.
And then you still have Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave as well. So that's a pretty good receiving core. Good friend Andrew Gwendon joins the show. Luther Burden falling to 38 tomorrow would be perfect for New England. I agree. It's interesting that Andrew says that because while we were all waiting around for the first round to finish up in the media room, that came up. And I think Luther Burden, if you're thinking about going receiver there, they're going to have their fair share of quality options, I think. But Luther Burden, if you're looking for a guy that can play the Z or the F and potentially develop into a 1 or a 2, I'm not sure if he develops into a 1, but he certainly could be a productive second receiver. Luther Burden, I think, would be a pretty good value pick at 38.
And I think if you look at day 2 in general tomorrow, and I know we're focusing on pick 38, there's legit receiver value across day 2. I mean, Alec Eomanor is going to be, I think, there at 38. Jaden Higgins might be there at 38.
Yeah.
And Kyle Williams and Trey Harris could be there for them in the third round as well, pick 69. Like, there's going to be, I think, legit receiver value available for them, at least at 38. And not to say that they'll take both, but at both picks they have, their first 2 picks, and then, of course, they have 77 as well. So tomorrow, I think, or later today, technically, I think could be a great moment for them to take a receiver because I think there's going to be legit talent and legit value there in the second and third round.
Yeah, as far as Luther Burden goes, the character concerns I'm not really worried about because the talent is so great. He was maybe the most impressive film I watched while scouting players. You just give him the ball and he makes stuff happen. I'm not really one for comparisons, but he looks like Deebo Samuel on film to me, and super impressive what he can do with the ball in his hand. Outside of him, there is plenty of options there, but the Patriots need to be aggressive. You can't wait around and look for a specific guy. It's kind of similar to Campbell. You need the position. You know there's the talent. If it's a reach, it's a reach, but you need them, and there is plenty of options. You got to go pick one, and if they start going and you need to trade up to get one, then and that would be in the third round probably, but you need to do it. I want to take one at 38 and just get it out the way. I think there's plenty of value there, but you need a receiver on day 2. There's no question about that.
Real quick before we do jump into that to wrap up the show, some names to watch for day 2. Thoughts on Shedeur Sanders slipping into the second round? I'm not surprised at all. I've said this from the very beginning. I'm not a Shedeur Sanders fan. I wasn't. I do think part of the problem is the offense they ran at Colorado, and shame on Pat Shurmur, guy who has NFL experience. It seemed like every time you watch the Colorado game or you watch them on film, every throw is 15 to 35 yards down the field. They couldn't run the football. They couldn't protect him. It was very helter-skelter. I made a comment that I think turned some heads in the sense that people think higher of him than they should. To me, he's an above-average Tyrod Taylor, guys. I don't see what other people see here. I didn't love this quarterback class to begin with, but when I look at him, I never saw this elite level starter that can be a top 10, top 15 quarterback in the league. No way. And for Mel Kiper, who I have the utmost respect for, okay, he's the godfather of the industry, and I've been doing this for 25 years, and Mel's been an inspiration to me like so many other people that have gotten in this business. And I remember when I started doing this stuff in 1999, it was Mel. I worked with Todd McShay, Gary Horton at Scouts Inc. We were the only ones doing it. Joel Bucksbaum at Pro Football Weekly, that was it. I have a ton of respect for Mel, but to sit there and to pound the table the way he was for this kid tonight, like, can we just stop? There's a reason why Tom Pelissero's piece the other day, there was a quarterback's coach in there who basically said it's the worst interview we've ever had. It's the worst interview I've ever been a part of. Okay. Now, look, I'm all for protecting the kids and not attacking them personally and not taking away from this moment for them. But if a quarterback's coach in the league, a veteran quarterback's coach in the league comes out and says that should tell you something. He has no reason to say that. He has no reason to sink this kid. No, we don't know. Maybe he has an axe to grind with Deion Sanders. Who knows? But at the end of the day, no NFL executive would come out and say that unless the interview went sideways. And I bet you it did. And I think there's a sense of entitlement there. I think this kid thinks he's better than he is. And I spoke to several people over the course of the last few weeks that I know in the scouting community that said to me, they're like, more than half the league sees this kid as a second-round pick. There's only about 10 teams that probably see him going in the first round. That should tell you everything you need to know. Now, he'll get drafted tomorrow night and probably relatively early within the first 10 to 12 picks. But if he goes beyond that and he slips into the bottom of the second round, dare I say early third round, I think it's going to validate what a lot of people think of him.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this on Tuesday night, and I felt that last-minute workout the Giants had with him a week ago, to me, that was more about the Giants' second-round pick or potentially trading up into the first than it was picking him in the top 5. And it turns out the Giants did trade up into the first round, but it was for Jackson Dart, so they didn't even end up going with Sanders. And I think you look at those two guys, like Jackson Dart has all these traits and all these things that you like, but then Ole Miss just always underperformed with him there. And like, that's kind of a red flag. Whereas Sanders, like, you see the talent sometimes, but it's not always like you don't always see it. And Colorado was pretty inconsistent. And part of that is their offensive line was terrible, especially 2 years ago.
Their scheme was terrible.
So
they made no effort to run the football. So you don't know what this kid can do in terms of handling the ball.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just like, when we describe guys like that, it's usually guys that would go in the late first or the second round, right? Like, because when you talk about Cam Ward, we're like, hey, this dude is really good. He can lead a team. Like, he can be a legit franchise QB. Maybe not as good as Jaden Daniels or Drake May last year, but he can be one of those guys. That's the guy that goes in the top 5. Whereas the way we talked about Jackson Dart and Shedeur Sanders in the pre-draft process, that's usually the guy that maybe goes late first or a lot of times is a second round guy. I mean, it's, your Derek Carr, your Jimmy Garoppolo, like guys like that, where you can see it sometimes, but you don't always see it. And they end up late first, early second round guys.
I think what's interesting to me is like what the Giants did tonight. You trade back into the first round to draft a quarterback because you get that extra year of security on their contract.
Fifth-year option, yep.
Yep, and the fact that teams at the beginning of the second round weren't willing to give up what was probably not going to be too much to move up just a couple of picks to get back into the first round, I think that tells me something. And I don't know if he's going to even go at the beginning of the second round because you lose that year at the end of the contract. So if they're not willing to commit to him long term, I don't know if they're willing to commit to him at all in the beginning of the second round. So I wouldn't be surprised if he falls even further. And the team that Mel Kiper kept hyping up was the Saints. So maybe he falls to the Saints a little bit further. But the Browns have 2 picks early in the second round. I don't know. He was getting mocked there a lot from what I saw. I don't buy that. I'm not sure. I think they would have traded back up if they really wanted him to get that.
They have the ammunition.
And I think you look at, like, you bring up a good point where, like, the second Browns pick is at 36, then you have the Raiders at 37 and the Saints at 40. If none of those 3 teams takes him, it's like, I don't know if I see a real landing spot. I mean, maybe the Jets have some interest at pick 42. I don't know, like, but I mean, I don't know, like, San Francisco's not going to take him. Dallas isn't. The Colts aren't. The Rams aren't. I don't know. It's all of a sudden, it's tough to see a landing spot. If he's past the Jets at 42, it could be a little while before he gets taken.
And I think, in fairness to the kid, I think when you watch his tape, he does some good things. I think he throws the ball with timing and anticipation, especially vertically. I think he does a pretty good job of ball placement and layering his route concepts and putting the ball where he needs to. I think he's probably a better athlete than I think he's being evaluated as. I think he does a pretty good job of sticking his foot in the ground and vacating the pocket out the front door and the back door. He does some nice things. So I'm not saying that there isn't ability there or potential there. I don't think he should step on a football field as a starter for at least a year, maybe even 2. Now, I think if you're him, the good news is you just mentioned Cleveland, the Saints, the Jets. These are all teams, the Raiders. These are all teams that need to invest in a young quarterback. I think he's probably going to be off the board by the time the Patriots pick. If I had to guess, he's going to go no later than 40, in my opinion, in the second round. I think one of those teams, if not, maybe Dallas takes him with their second round pick. I know that sounds wild, but it's Jerry Jones. But I do think at the end of the day, it's a cautionary tale. And that tale is that the quarterback position, if a guy's not popping, if the production was there, but he doesn't pop physically, it doesn't matter what the numbers were in college. If the numbers, the measurables, and the production don't add up, you're not going to go in the first round as a quarterback. And even a guy like Dart, again, this illustrates what I've always said about the draft. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I don't think he was a first-round pick. I thought Jackson Dart was probably a second-round pick. But the fact that the Giants traded back in to get him, good on them. I'm not sure I see it with him either. I think he's got better arm talent than Sanders, and I think he's better in certain areas than Sanders. I like him more as a quarterback than Sanders, but certainly I'm not surprised that he slipped out of the first round. I think it's a cautionary tale, too, that sometimes the media drives up the value of these players.
I was going to say that. I think Sanders is a good football player with great marketing, and that's where his value was in the draft. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the tape never lies, and teams got past all the PR stuff that was going on, and now you're seeing why that is happening. And the same with Dart. He was getting, when I was talking with you on the show at the Senior Bowl, everyone I talked to in person, not a fan of Jackson Dart. You go on X, you go on Instagram, all you see is how great Jackson Dart's been at the Senior Bowl. So he ended up going in the first round. I don't think he's a first-round talent. Both of them have been the product of good football play, but great marketing.
Yeah, one last point from me on Sanders. I kind of go back and wonder, if they don't beat TCU in week 1 of 2023, does the hype train even get started with him, and do we even get to this point? Because that was the game, right? Like, TCU had just been to the national championship game. They beat TCU. Remember, they beat Colorado State in overtime, which in hindsight, you shouldn't need overtime to beat Colorado State if you're Colorado. But they beat him in overtime. He talks about going Brady mode. And then all of a sudden the hype train is there. So I really go back and wonder. And that was a great win for them.
Then he went Damon Heward mold.
That's true.
That was it.
Yeah, and like, I'm not like, that was a great win for that program, and I give him credit. But I do wonder if TCU wins that game, maybe that hype train never gets fully going to this point, and we're talking about Sanders as a second-round pick all along.
Yeah. I think the other thing to wrap up this part of the conversation that hurts him too is He's never played for anybody else. He's only played for his father. And I know a couple of scouts said to me that was a major red flag with some organizations. How was he going to adjust to not playing for his father and playing for a new coach? What was that going to be like? How involved was the father going to be? So, unfortunately, look, Coach Prime, he talks the talk. Generally speaking, he walks the walk. But to Paul's point, the hype machine, the marketing, some teams don't want that baggage. Bottom line is, to wrap this all up, the kid's not good enough to come with all that baggage. And so at the end of the day, NFL teams are looking at this and saying, no. We're not a charity organization here. We're not going to give him a shot because he's Deion's kid. If he were good enough for us to put up with Deion and the bullshit that comes with Coach Prime, we would do it. The kid's not good enough to put up with the BS. So that's why he's still sitting on the board waiting to get picked. All right, let's wrap up the show here real quick with some thoughts on day two, where we've kind of sort of talked about where we would like to see the Patriots go. Who are some players potentially that you might like that you think could be potential Patriot targets at picks 38, 69, 77?
So I'll say this. If Donovan Ezaraku was there at 38, I would take him there. And I know we talked about receiver 5 minutes ago, and I'd like a receiver too. But, I mean, you could make the case that's the second best edge player in the class, third at worst. And if he's there at pick 38, I would definitely take him there. I like Alec Eomanor at receiver too, and Jaden Higgins at 38. You know this, John. I'm a huge Trey Harris supporter at pick 69. If he's there, I take him. Obviously, Dylan Sampson. One other name, too, that depending on how the board falls, I'm pretty high on, is Carson Schweswinger, the linebacker out of UCLA. I think he plays downhill. He's big, but he still kind of fits that Robert Spillane mold. He's a little bit bigger than Spillane. He plays downhill, but he doesn't over pursue. So I think that's something like those are some guys that I would like quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the Higgins train. I want to see him picked at 38, along with his teammate Jalen Knoll. I think he's terrific. A little overlay there with being a slot receiver, but a guy that has some versatility and could work well with McDaniels in his offense. Outside of that, I think they're going to add to the trenches again on the defensive side. I like Alfred Collins and his teammate, Baron Sorrell. I don't know if he's going to go day 3 or day 2.
Yeah, I think he's more of a day 3 prospect, but I agree with you, Paul. I like him too.
I do, and I think he's got some room for growth. But I think Omar Norman-Lott, another guy that if he falls, you got to have your eye on him. There's plenty of depth at defensive tackle this year, and I think with the uncertainty of Christian Barmore and Milton Williams, who was a rotational guy on the Eagles, like they constantly rotated people. If you look at his snap percentages, not too high. So it's sketchy playing him, 70, 80% of snaps on defense. I think they target a defensive tackle to be a solid rotational piece with Barmore and Williams. So I want to be on the lookout for that in round 3, but they need to take care of wide receiver first.
Yeah, a guy like Darius Alexander out of Toledo is another player that I like. The 3 technique in this defense is going to have some length. They're going to want a guy that's in the 6'2.5", 6'3", 6'4", 295, 305 range. They want a 3 tech with length that can stack and shed blockers and play down the line of scrimmage. I think there's a lot of guys in this draft that fit that profile. Earlier, when Andrew checked in, we talked about Luther Burden, and I think he'd be a pretty good value pick at 38. But, John, I'm with you. I think if Donovan Ezaraku is sitting there, you may even want to consider trading up to get him. I know that might be a bit strong. Do you want to give up one of those third-rounders to do it? It may take that. But, man, if you can get Donovan Ezaraku at 38, a player that they're going to know very well. I've gotten the chance to cover Donovan's career at Boston College. First of all, a hell of a human being. He's a great kid. He's also a hell of a football player, 16.5 sacks last year. If you can add him to this pass rush group, I think that there's tremendous value there. And while I understand receivers still a need, we're living in a world now where you can't have enough pass rushes. Look at the Giants. They're going to be rolling out Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and Abdul Carter and potentially Kayvon Thibodeau. I mean, we're living in a world now where you need to get a base pass rush and play coverage. The Eagles showed us that that's the formula to stopping great offenses in the league right now. Pass rushes are going to be in demand. If Ezaraku's sitting there at 38, I think he's a player you have to consider. Paul, to your point, I think wide receiver, look, one thing I'll say about wide receiver, though, is it's the deepest position in football now. You can get a talented player well into day 3. Not sure they need to go there in day 2 per se, but we'll see. And then the other thing is interior defensive line. I can see them going there as well as linebacker, although I think they'll address linebacker on day 3. They also need a kicker. Something we're not talking about enough. They don't have a kicker right now, so they need a kicker as well. All right, gentlemen, thanks for taking the time tonight to stay up late to do the show. Let's chat again tomorrow after rounds 2 and 3.
For sure.
Sounds good.
All right. That'll do it for this episode of Patriots Pulse. From my co-host, John Lyons, Paul Vauzel, I'm John Sarianides. We'll be back with you tomorrow night. Until then, peace.